All right, let's talk photosynthesis. So this is something that you have heard for years and years and years in your science classes. We kind of know what it is. We know it has to do with plants. We're going to get into the nitty gritty of it. Some of this can be a review. Some of this is going to be new stuff. But what we are going to be talking about for the next couple days is something called the cell energy cycle. So it's the process in which cells make energy, but we have to start with the recipe for energy, which is photosynthesis. Okay, so all in all, what we need to know is who photosynthesizes. So organisms called producers. So these are plants, they are plant-like organisms, they are things that photosynthesize. All right, so these are the roots to our ecological food chains. This is who makes the base material for all of these other living things in an ecosystem to actually have food, to gain energy, to go about their daily life functions. Okay, so producers, they convert this light energy into a chemical energy called photosynthesis. Okay, so the chemical energy that is produced during photosynthesis is in the form of sugar. Okay, so what is photosynthesis? It is the process, and make sure that you're writing this down in your notes. It's the process of making sugar from sunlight. Okay, so we're taking this light energy and we're turning it into sugar. Now, the type of sugar that's being made is glucose. And if we do a little review from our biomolecules unit, we know that most of our things that end in OSE are carbohydrates. So glucose is a carbohydrate. So it's got that CH and O. All right, its monomer is a monosaccharide. There's your little review for you. All right, we say that plants can photosynthesize, okay? So plants are eukaryotic cells. These are our plant cells, okay? Our eukaryotic cells, remember that eukaryotic means it has that nucleus, okay? All right, where does photosynthesis happen? It happens in this organelle right here. And this is something that's very specific to plants. We should know this. It happens in the chloroplast. Okay, so it happens in the chloroplast. It happens in the chloroplast of eukaryotic plant cells, okay? Now, somebody's gonna ask me this, and I do want you to know this information. Can prokaryotes photosynthesize? Yeah, they can. There are some of them that are plant-like. They just do not have chloroplast, all right? And in order to photosynthesize, you have to have a very specific pigment called chlorophyll. Sorry about that bell. All right, so you have to have chlorophyll in order for photosynthesis to occur. Now, can prokaryotes photosynthesize? Yeah, they don't have chloroplast, so how do they photosynthesize? Well, they still have chlorophyll, and it's actually located in the cell itself. So it's not contained within a membrane-bound organelle. Remember, a prokaryote does not have a nucleus, does not have membrane-bound organelles. So it doesn't have this chloroplast, but it does have this chlorophyll, which is what allows photosynthesis to occur. Now, if we look at our recipe, our chemical reaction for photosynthesis, okay, here's our chemical reaction. So we're going to have CO2, and I'm gonna write out the chemical structures and then we'll go back in and relabel them, plus H2O, plus sunlight. And whenever we write a chemical reaction, we're going to draw an arrow, okay? That arrow is going to show what our reactants turn into, okay? So we're going to start with our reactants, we're going to end with our products. So this arrow means yields or makes, all right? And it makes C6H12O6. Don't let that confuse you. I'll tell you what that is in a second. And O2. Okay, so if we go back in and label what exactly all these things are, let me use a different color down here. All right, so CO2 is carbon dioxide. So label that below where it says CO2. All right, H2O we know is water. Most abundant inorganic compound in living things. Sunlight, we're not going to label. We know what sunlight is. All right, C6H12O6, that is glucose. That's our sugar that's being produced. All right, and then O2 is oxygen. All right, so if we go in and we actually pull our reactants and our products, we're going to see what we start with is our reactants. So I'm gonna write that here. This is what we start with in a chemical reaction. Remember, it's the same thing when we were talking about enzymes. Your reactants were what you started with, okay? So what we start with is our CO2, our H2O, and our sunlight. So our carbon dioxide, our water, and our sunlight. Okay, those reactants go into this process, and it's then turned into our products. So our C6H12O6, C6H12O6. So our products are what you end with. So write that in there. C6H12O6, which is glucose, our sugar, and O2, which is oxygen. All right, so we start with CO2, H2O, sunlight. We end with our glucose and our oxygen. Note that nowhere in that entire process did it ever say anything about energy, okay? So glucose is an ingredient for a process called cellular respiration, okay? And cellular respiration is gonna be on the next video. It's the next day when we talk about the cell energy cycle, because cellular respiration takes that glucose and it turns it into a usable form of energy, which we know is called ATP. Now, let's emphasize this. Photosynthesis does not make ATP. What it does make is glucose. Okay, so it makes glucose. Now, what I want you to do, I put this little flower right here. I want you to draw with arrows your reactants going into the flower. So this is just kind of our symbol of photosynthesis. And then arrows going out, showing your products coming out of that process. So what I want you to do right now is pause the video, and I want you to label this flower. All right, so let's check our work. All right, so going in to our flower, we have our carbon dioxide, we have our water, and we have our sunlight. All right, what we have coming out are our products. So what's being released or produced, I shouldn't say released necessarily, is glucose and then oxygen. And now you got photosynthesis.